So I'm Melissa and I am an alcoholic and addict. And I have 8 years sober, clean and sober, but this year I'll have 9 years. And so I guess I'll start off of like where it all began. And so when I was younger, growing up as a child, it was very traumatic for me. I had a lot of abuse growing up, and that started at a very young age of sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, as young as probably 5 years old is what I remember as where it started for me. And then so that progressed, and it just like was a progression until I was about 8 years old. And then I actually watched my mom being beat and my brothers and sisters. We were just like all torn apart. And so that really, had an effect on my childhood, and actually and it followed me into my adulthood. And so when I was younger, I learned how to disassociate from my body. And so when things that were happening to me were bad, I just disassociated. And so that's like played a big part of like not really remembering a lot of my childhood, I believe. So I was probably around 9 or 10 years old, and I decided I was going to run away. And I actually ran away with a girlfriend of mine, a childhood friend. And we went downtown Salt Lake City, jumped on a train, and we were reported as runaways at first. And then we were reported as missing children because we were gone for so long. We ended up in Chadron, Nebraska, and that was a scary train ride, because we ended up stopping in the middle of nowhere, and it felt like the train was just going to stay there and we were going to die out there because it felt like forever. But when the train started moving again and we ended up in the Chadron, Nebraska, we got caught. And my parents, so my dad was never in, like my real dad was never really in my life. He left when I was a baby. And so I had a stepdad, and the stepdad played a role in them molesting me. And also I had family members that did that to me as well. So when my parents got called to come pick me up, instead of them being loving and kind, like, oh my gosh, my daughter's found, it was, how dare you run away? You wasted our gas money. And I got beat on the way back home. And so by the time, so that was when I was 8 to 9 years old. And then by the time I'm 15, actually no, 11, I'm smoking weed and cigarettes. And then at the age 12, they moved to Casper, Wyoming. And that's where it all began for me, like all the hard drugs. It was, back then was crank. And then it went from, I just did whatever I could get my hands on. Pills, alcohol, and acid, all that kind of stuff. And then I ran away at 15. And I actually have never turned back. I've been on my own ever since. So I got pregnant at a young age, and then had my first son at 16, turned 17 right after. I did quit doing drugs, alcohol, all that stuff each time I got pregnant, but went back to the same old scenario. By the time I was 18, I was like against using meth. And it was more just like drinking at that time. So I was clean off of the hard drugs for about 10 years, and then just went through a lot of toxic relationships throughout my using days and drinking days, to where I had ended up relapsing again onto meth. And then that's where it led me, because by this time I have 4 children. I've been married once right now. And then I have the 4 children. One was with not the marriage, it was with a toxic relationship of 4 years. And then I met my husband that I married while I was still using, and he was against the hard drugs, but he sold it. But he didn't do it, but he sold it. So that's why I actually quit and was against it. And then he kind of like cleaned up his drug dealing, because I was like, well, if I'm going to quit, then you're going to quit. And so anyway, we ended up getting married and having 3 kids. And then we were married for about going on 9 years and had a divorce. Through that whole entire marriage, there was drinking, using cocaine every once in a while, just fighting a lot. And so my kids witnessed a lot of drinking and fighting with their dad. And so I decided to divorce because there was, just a lot of toxicity, and just, it wasn't good at all. And so I was the full-time mom. He was every other weekend dad. And then I got introduced back to meth because there was this guy that was across the way and my kids were with their dad and he was smoking meth. And so I was like, I just did it. I was actually drunk when I did it. And that led down a path of destruction, complete destruction. Cause I'm going, I'm not married no more. I'm having a hard time. And I'm taking the kids back and forth, and I was struggling a lot with mental health too. And so I literally took the kids, dropped them off to their dad and said, you be the full-time dad. I'll be the every other weekend mom. And I dropped them off. And then my son went to his dad in California and I went on a full 5-year binge of, I lost everything, homelessness, toxic relationship after another, being beat on the streets, almost strangled to death. A lot of evil things out there happened to me. And then I started shooting up meth and it just spiraled out of control in and out of jail. And then, a lot experience and a lot of abuse and very toxic men out there. And so I don't really need to get into all the what I was involved in. And I mean, in and out of jail, we all know how it is, how it's like out there. And so I want to get into the more my recovery began for me. The last arrest was 2013 and there was just something different that time in jail. I remember just sticking to myself and praying to God, even though at that time I'm angry at God. I've always been a believer. I just was really angry. And, but I was praying a lot that time. And I was led to go to the Women's Retreat House, and that's in Ogden. So that's where my recovery journey began. And then it's an inpatient place where you can do 30, 60, or 90 days. And during that time before I got into my last arrest, I met a guy, my second husband. He was using at the time, but also took me off the streets and introduced me, talked to me about the 12 steps of AA and what recovery is. And I never heard of it. And so he ended up getting arrested and then I ended up getting arrested. And this is before we're married, and then I got into the Women's Retreat House. While I was doing the Women's Retreat House and he was in jail, I lived at his parent after I did the Women's Retreat House. I actually was not ready for the Women's Retreat House when I got out of jail. I went into there with a stug mentality of don't tell me what to do type of, I just wasn't ready. I mean, I was ready, but I wasn't, I guess, ready at that time. So I did get kicked out after I didn't make it 30 days, but the grateful thing is when I got kicked out, I went straight to his parents' house instead of back to the dope houses. I went to where he had took me and they actually took me in and let me live there while he was in jail. And so I did get myself back into the Women's Retreat House, but it wasn't until I was 4 years sober and I was because I'm on probation. I got out of jail and I'm on felony probation. I'm doing the DORA program, which includes MRT. And so that's an extensive, drug program that you're in. And I was just all in it, going to meetings. This is after being kicked out, but I was still wanting to be sober. So I'm doing my probation, doing meetings. I get a sponsor and, I'm just doing the deal while I'm not married to the guy yet, but he's in jail and I'm living at his parents' house. And so I don't have a car. I don't have anything. So I have to catch the bus and I truck it to meetings, to my MRT classes, to the DORA program. And I'm just doing as much as I can to stay sober. And then I end up marrying him and we're married for 4 years and we don't have the healthiest relationship because I know how to have healthy relationships and I'm more codependent. And so I'm still learning. 4 years into my sobriety, I end up relapsing because there's abuse in the marriage. And so I put myself back into the Women's Retreat House. And this is where I did over 90 days. And I really flourished there and got out or did the whole 90 days. And then they do where you can get a job and then you still come and live there and then you transition out. So I did that. And then I actually got to do a live-in manager. And so I came back and I sponsored women and I lived there as a live-in manager to, give back of what I learned to other women. And so I did that for about almost a year there. And then I moved on. And then I actually met a guy and got together with him and thinking that he's, sober and he's working the program because I met him and he was sober. But it ended up being a 7-year toxic relationship. And throughout that 7 years, I've relapsed one more time. And so we were together for a year and I came home and he had everything in the house, the needles, the drugs, all of it. And so I was just so angry and I was like, I'm just throwing my recovery away at this point. And so that was my last relapse of July 25th of 2017. And unfortunately, I stayed with him. I ended up going into after that relapse happened, it really mentally destroyed me because I never used with him before and really bad things happened while we used together. And so it was very traumatic to me. And I also like to say is relapse does not have to be a part of your recovery. And unfortunately, it was mine. But that last relapse really scared me. I ended up almost killing myself and I went into a mental hospital. And then I got out and stayed with him and dealt with he kept relapsing over and over and over and over. I held on and I did not relapse. And I was I was fighting, for a long time in that relationship because of everything that was going on. And I was just so codependent and thinking that I can change him or that he's going to change or something's going to change, but it never did. And things got ugly. I was still going to meetings and still doing my program. And he was doing his own thing and not doing anything. So we did end up separating for a year. And I really did really well. And that's when I actually was introduced into Recovery for Christ. And I really loved that program. That's where I actually connected with a personal relationship with God. And that's what really has helped me throughout the rest of my story. And unfortunately, I did get back with him. And the last 3 years was extremely dark. I wanted to not be alive again. I was about ready to give up my recovery again because like it's in the house and I'm really just unhappy at that point. And then I stopped praying. I stopped going to a non-denominational church that I found out in where I was living in Ogden. And I just stopped and I stopped what I loved most, and that's helping women and going to meetings and just sponsoring women and being a part of being connected. And now I'm worried about he's going to use and he's going to do what is he doing? Like, and I even like stopped talking to my family and it was just a whole just control type of situation, very unhealthy. Like he didn't tell me I couldn't, but I was so afraid of what he's doing and how he's going to hurt me and, just all of that. And so that was, man, trying to stay sober and having to deal with that was extremely dark for me. I was like, why am I even staying sober? I could numb myself and type of situation. And I know I didn't want to go back out to using and drinking and all that because I know where that leads and that's the streets and institutions or death, and so I'm just like, that's not what I want. So I started praying again and just praying for God to like help me get out of that situation. And 3 years ago, I left that toxic situation, came out to Tooele, and I was living with my niece. And then I Googled churches near me and I found New Life Christian Fellowship, got involved with that and started connecting with that. But then I kept on praying and, to God to help me to get back into helping women, like my passion. Like, and I don't know very much about Tooele, so I still really don't. But so a little over a month ago, I, got to actually become a support staff and then be able to help women again. And so that's what I'm doing right now is for my job and just, being able to share my story again is really meaningful to me because I think it's very important to be able to like, hey, look, I've been through this toxicity since a child that led me into abuse, that led me into like into my adulthood, still abuse. And like, I've never got to experience a healthy relationship yet. And my focus now is just, healing. And I've done that. And that's by having a personal relationship with God and being able to get back into a job that I'm actually helping women who are getting out of, drugs and getting off the streets and, wanting to turn their life around and being able to help in that area. That's where my heart is. And that's where I know I should continue to be and continue to, you know, reach out. And then also I found the Celebrate Recovery out here. And so I started, going to meetings again because that's just where my roots are. I have done the AA 12 steps and that did help me, you know what I mean? But just having that connection with with God is where that's given me the strength to continue down this path. So.
Well, first off camera, that story is absolutely incredible. Lots of perseverance, lots of, throw the damn towel and give up. And, what many people I feel like would try a couple times and they just get stuck. And
yeah,
it's shitty to hear that you have like abusive parents growing up. And then obviously that's what you probably expect as a grown woman. You're just used to that. So you
yeah,
in that in a weird way. And, we're lucky to have people like you that come here because that's just so cool that you are like the example of not giving up, keep going. You've been through everything from X, Y, and Z. And, it's just cool. It's like now the cool part about this job is, you get to see the other side of what also me seeing your story and seeing where you are now. It's so cool. And it just always reminds me of like what we do is super impactful. And I think that's amazing. So I'm sure the girls over there probably really latch on to you.
yeah, yeah. It's been amazing. So the reason why I like working at NAT-SU is because my core belief is everything that I've been through that has been like bad that's happened to me in my life. I didn't go through that for nothing. And I believe that I am supposed to be able to help others and help them to show them that there is a way of life after trauma, after being abused, after being addicted on the streets or whatever the case may be. Like for me being, homeless and addicted, like there is a life after that. And that if you put it all into your recovery, you will, you'll get that out and you'll be able to live a happy life. And so that's what my desire is to help women who have been through that. And so that's why I love working at NAT-SU, is being able to give back what I've learned and what I've been given. And that's a life full of, love and joy and happiness.